Just a couple of points before we go back to the practice. So for the Shamatha practice, for the cultivating these three qualities of relaxation, stability, clarity, we're using this analogy of the roots, trunk, and branches and leaves of a tree. So the initial emphasis is on relaxation. So there we are cultivating relaxation without losing the clarity we begin with. Normally when we relax, of course, we become very dull. So initially we're cultivating relaxation and maintaining whatever level of clarity we have, not allowing it to go further into dullness. Then on that basis we cultivate stability without losing the relaxation that we've cultivated. So we're not stabilizing the mind at the expense of losing relaxation. And then on the basis of a stable mind, we cultivate clarity without losing the relaxation and stability that we have cultivated. Now, in this practice we're doing today, the focusing at the nostrils, there can be very much the tendency to tense because we're bringing the attention up and the object is much smaller, harder to focus on. So therefore we need to keep a check on the body and the mind and see if our mind is really starting and body starting to get tense. And then particularly on each out-breath, relax and release that tension. So with this practice, often where the tension builds up is across here, either around the eyes or across the forehead. We maybe start to notice a lot of sensations in this area. So that's a sure sign that tension is building up. And again, to release that on every out-breath. If you can't release the tension on the out-breath, then don't stay here. Because even if it's very clear, if you stay here with tension and you do that for a longer period of time, not only will you become very exhausted, but you'll become very, very agitated. So we don't really want that to happen. So therefore, if you notice any tension, particularly across the forehead, the shoulder, around the eyes, release on the out-breath, release, release. If you can't release the tension, then don't stay here, but go back to the abdomen or full body. Bring the attention down and just work on relaxation. Then when you're much more relaxed, then you can go back to the nostrils. So just keep that in mind. One other point, and then we'll go to the practice, is to let go of expectations. Because normally, or very often, we come into these sorts of practices with completely unrealistic expectations. You know, we often think, you know, I should be able to focus on the breath okay. You know, that can't be too difficult. You know, maybe I'll get a bit dull and distracted, but I think I should be able to do that okay. But then, of course, what happens is that we try to focus on the breath, and then usually after a couple of seconds, off we go. And usually we're off on our story for a long period of time, maybe many minutes, before we realise, oh, hang on, I'm supposed to be on the breath. And then we come back to the breath for another 2 or 3 seconds, and then off we go again. And when that happens, of course, we get frustrated, and we often come to the conclusion, I can't meditate. I just can't meditate. And then also, we often come to the conclusion, I must be doing something wrong. Because before, my mind was sort of okay, now it's completely out of control, so I must be doing something wrong. And then often also what happens is people sort of open their eyes a little bit and look around in the room and everyone else is very still. I'm the only one who can't meditate. I'm hopeless. Everyone else is meditating well. I'm just hopeless. So if this is your experience, you can meditate. In fact, that's the very first sign of progress in Shamatha. And actually, we can see that in this diagram, which we're going to look at in some days' time in more detail. already down the bottom we saw that the meditator in their left hand had the rope of mindfulness to tie the mind to the object, and then the hook of introspection to hook the mind back when we become dull or distracted. The elephant is the mind. The fact that it is black is symbolising this dullness. The monkey is conceptual discursive thought in general. The fact that it is black is symbolising this excitement or excitation. So what we see here actually at the first stage of practice is the elephant and monkey are running wildly ahead of the meditator. So what we see there, or what we notice, is that our mind is completely out of control. So actually that is the first sign of progress in this practice, to just simply notice how chaotic and out of control our mind really is. But of course, if we have an expectation that we can focus on the breath not too bad, we're just going to get frustrated. So we drop all those expectations. In fact, if we have no expectations, there can be no frustration. So drop all expectations. And also, often people have this idea of good meditation versus bad meditation. Often people feel like, I hear sometimes people talking about this amongst themselves. They say to another person, "Oh, today my meditation was really good. My mind was completely still, completely focused." Or another day they'll say, "Oh, my meditation was really bad today, really horrible. My mind was all over the place." If this is our idea of good and bad meditation, we're stuck. We're stuck in attachment and aversion. We're stuck in hoping for good things to happen in our meditation and having aversion to not so good things happening in our meditation. Because actually, from one day to the next, our mind changes a lot. Some days our mind is naturally more quiet still. Other days is naturally more agitated and distracted. So therefore, a good meditation is simply any meditation where we try to follow the instructions as best we can, no matter what happens. That's a good meditation. Bad meditation is when we sit down and we don't try to follow the instructions and we just let the mind do whatever it wants. So it's not so much a matter of what happens to us, because what happens to us changes a lot, but rather how we respond to what happens to us. That's the important thing. And together with that, to have a long-term perspective. Because one of the expectations that often people have is they have this expectation that each day or each week my practice should get better. It should go like this. I don't know anyone whose practice goes like this. In the short term, it's more like this. A lot of ups and downs. So, therefore, to have a long-term perspective, and again, we can avoid then frustration. And then also we can follow some advice from the great Indian master Shantideva from the 8th century, who says, no matter how difficult something seems, everything with practice becomes easy. So all we need to do is practice, and it'll become easy. But of course, expecting that after a couple of days or a week of practice that we're going to dramatically improve is very unrealistic. So again, to have that long-term perspective and understand in the short term a lot of variation, and just try to follow the instructions as best we can, and then be happy with that no matter what happens. Okay, so let's do the practice again at the nostrils. So again, if you have a lot of tension building up and you can't release it, then go back to the full body or abdomen until you're nice and relaxed, and then you can go back to the nostrils. setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. Relaxing more deeply with each out-breath. Not dwelling in the past, not anticipating the future. In particular, letting go of any expectations for this practice. Letting go of all of these things. And simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. Focusing on the sensations of the breath throughout the body. while keeping that relaxed body and mind as the basis, shift your attention to observing the breath at the entrance of the nostrils. And maintain an ongoing flow of mindfulness of the sensations of the breath throughout the entire cycle of each in and out breath.